Hi, everyone. Hi, David. I saw you just came on. Stephen is here. Don is here. Jeremy's here from Australia. Incredible steadfastness to stay up late. So we're going to begin with try to set motivation with prayers. Generally, when His Holiness teaches, I don't I don't think anyone announces that there are going to be prayers. They just start. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la Jiangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen gipe sognam gi drola penche sangye drupa sho. And then a mandala offering. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. May all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. Idam Guru Radna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Okay, so let's begin with a little meditation. Hi, Anna. So you just arrived. Uh, Sit comfortably, relax your body, relax your mind. Place your mindfulness on the breathing in front. and turn your attention to the much more subtle object of the mental consciousness. And by subtle analysis of the appearance of the consciousness, try to recall its conventional nature, the developmental Buddha nature, the fact that it offers no resistance to thoughts coming and going. This conventional clear light nature has no color or shape. It's not a darkness. It's not like a blue sky. It's something that is, quote, seen, unquote. That is, it's not seen with your physical eyes, but it's something that's perceived by the mental consciousness, is grasped by the mental consciousness, by the eyes of prajna and jnana, or the wisdom eye and the exalted wisdom eye, or the gnosis eye. It's a perception of a conventional thing, conventionally existent phenomena, this conventional clear light nature. And when we turn our mind to it, we should recall the implication of that, that we can get rid of all of the unskillful states of mind that we've brought into existence again and again this life. Some of them are more difficult to counter than others. The first step, of course, is to recognize their disadvantages. The disadvantage of anger and attachment. Anger may be more easy to see the disadvantages, but people who are who've rehearsed anger again and again might not see the disadvantages of it. They think it's something that releases them from turmoil, something good. Attachment, more difficult to see the disadvantages of, but we can get rid of all of these thoughts. We can get rid of even their basis, the fundamental ignorance, because the mind has this clear light nature. We can use this life to pursue those goals, getting rid of the afflictions to the best of our ability with conventional or temporal antidotes. But to really eliminate them completely, we need to realize emptiness. In order to achieve nirvana, we need to realize emptiness. But the Buddha mentioned again and again when he talked about the auspicious moment that we're experiencing now, called the life of leisure and endowment, that allows us to see this Buddha nature and to understand its implications. He said not to be, those of his intelligent disciples should not be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings alone. They should learn them, become proficient in them, but should not actualize them to the state of achieving nirvana, but instead should enter into the Mahayana path by means of developing the Mahayana mind of enlightenment, a mind that has two aspirations. One, to achieve not just nirvana itself, lower nirvana, but the full enlightenment of a Buddha. And the second aspiration is out of compassion for sentient beings, out of a desire that they be free from suffering. In order to achieve that enlightenment, for the sake of all mother sentient beings, each and every one, from the smallest insects to irritating humans to big, large animals or whatever, hell beings, preta beings, animals, gods, all have been our mother numberless times. They've been depthlessly kind. And just as we would like to alleviate the suffering of our present mother, remembering her kindness, if we still have her with us, we should feel the same toward all sentient beings. Ideally, we should, we can, it's possible. And with that state of mind, we can develop this thought of bodhicitta, which purifies so much negative karma, creates so much virtuous karma. In order to achieve that goal of enlightenment, the goal of bodhicitta, we have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are explained by Nagarjuna in his fundamental reasoning, a fundamental wisdom, the Mula Prajna, fundamental wisdom, also called the treatise on the Madhyamaka treatise, has various names. To understand it, we have to depend on the perfect commentators of that, Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti, especially Chandrakirti, who Lama Tsong depended on for his own study of Madhyamaka, as he was told by Manjushri that Chandrakirti was a 10th level bodhisattva who had taken rebirth in order to eliminate the misunderstandings about the correct view of emptiness. Lama Tsongkhapa wrote a commentary on both the word and meaning commentaries to Fundamental Wisdom by Chandrakirti. Lama Tsongkhapa's Ocean of Reasoning is a commentary to the Prasanapada by Chandrakirti. And the Gompa Rabsel, the Illumination of the Intent, is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Bhasham. So think, I'm going to participate today listening, contemplating, and meditating on the material with a childlike mind, one that doesn't presuppose I already know this, but listening with a fresh mind in order to achieve eventually enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's my end goal. Whatever comes up in between now and enlightenment whether I have a bad day or a bad life, if I'm born in the hell realms or whatever, I try to have such a strong aspiration, remembrance of the goal of enlightenment, that I won't let those states be hindrances or obstacles to my practice. I'm going to listen, participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, all mother sentient beings. Okay. So, good to see you again. Karen's joined us. Karen, what do you, how are you coping with David's eyes?
He doesn't look like a Shar-Pei anymore. He's doing good.
He's doing good? Okay. Can you flip them up for a moment? Okay.
It's
Yeah.
better.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Yeah. So good to see you all. Before we start in the text, I wanted to explain a little bit about a tanka image that Doris brought to my attention just recently. Doris, have you posted already that, where is it, in the chats? There's a PDF there. It's called LTK's Vision, if you want to download that. So some of you may know there is a tradition of explaining Lama Tsongkhapa's life by means of how many tankas are there in that series, Paul? Do you know? So this is an explanation of one particular tanka, tanka number 10 in that series. I don't have the whole PDF in front of me right now. Doris, how many tankas are there altogether in that?
There's 15.
15.
There's an FPMT booklet. Do you want me to share?
Yes, if people would like, they can get this booklet. This was composed by, it said Venerable, I think Tenzin Lexok, but he's now Geshe Lexok, one of our American Geshes, and very, very well studied. And he translated this a couple of years ago, a text that accompanied the tankas and explained all of the details. So what I wanted to explain here is this particular one part of this image, which you'll see if you can download that PDF. Are you having trouble, Anna? Can you download that? You got it? Okay, good. Okay. So let me read what Geshe Lexok said. This is, it has a formal title, but the meaning of the title is A Method for Depicting the Sacred Biography, which is, what is that usually? What's sacred biography in Tibetan? Does anyone know? Nadine's tip of her tongue.
Namta?
Namtar, yeah. Sometimes, I mean, you could translate it as complete liberation. But usually that's a word that's used for these kinds of explanations, kind of like biography. So a method for depicting the sacred biography of great Jetsun Tsongkhapa on painted cloth in 153 parts. So there may be 15 tankas in this series, but each of them, if you can see this first tanka, in tanka number 10, you can see there are various parts of it. And there is a guide in the booklet itself that sort of shows you an explanation about the various parts. We're going to be talking about a part in the lower left-hand side as you're looking at the tanka. I wonder if anyone, if you go to the next page, you can see a detail of that. Can anyone tell me who the top figure is? Don, can you tell me who the top figure is in that snippet from the Tanka? You're muted, so I can't hear your musings. If you press the space bar, you're usually unmuted, depending on.
No, it's too small. I really can't see it.
On the next page, if you go through the PDF, the next page, there's an enlargement of that section. I don't think that will be too small for you. Stephen, can you recognize who that is on the top?
That looks like Nagarjuna to me, Venerable George.
Yeah, there's all these nagas, snakes coming over his head, right? That's usually. Go on. Don, were you going to say something?
No, I just chuckled at the snakes.
Yeah, right. They're nagas, yeah. So there are, below him are 4 individuals that seem to be debating or reading texts. And then below those 4, there's another monk bending over with his hands at his heart.
One of the greatest Buddhist masters from Tibet. Sometime the year of his passing away, he passed away in 1492.
I can hear something else going on. Is someone playing the? Okay, I wasn't sure what was going on. So let me read what Geshe Leksok's commentary is first of all, and then a snippet from Geshe Thupten Jinpa's translation of or the biography of Lama Tsongkhapa. So they're talking about the same thing. So this is called P2. That's part 2 of Tanka 10. Having worked for the welfare of the Buddha Dharma, like this in the areas of Ngel. Ngel is some area near Woka Valley where Lama Tsongkhapa had done this long retreat with, hundreds of thousands of prostrations, 100,000 prostrations to each of the 35 Buddhas. So Ngel is an area near there. Tsongkhapa then made his way to the area at the foot of Mount Ode Gongel, where he stayed at Dakpo Lading and gave many Dharma teachings. One evening, an auspicious portent arose. What does that mean? What is a portent? Did I put the emphasis on the right syllable there?
Omen?
An omen.
Maybe.
Yeah. Portent, something that portends some future good thing. One evening, an auspicious portent arose, having made intense requesting prayers to the inseparable Lama and deity. I mean, it says Lama Tsongkhapa's own guru, inseparable with Manjushri. Tsongkhapa had a dream in which the Holy Father and 4 sons, that means Holy Father means Nagarjuna, accompanied by his 4 special Madhyamaka sons, Aryadeva, that was his main disciple while he was alive, Buddhapalita and Bhaviveka, who came after him and had these countering views of what Nagarjuna was actually explaining, what the middle view was, and along with Chandrakirti. So there were 4. So you've got Nagarjuna at top, and then you've got Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Bhaviveka, and Chandrakirti. So they appeared in his dream discussing whether there is inherent existence or not. Oh boy, what a nice dream to have, right? From their midst, one tall pundit with a clear bluish complexion arose, saying that he was Buddhapalita. He came toward Tsongkhapa's pillow, carrying an Indian scripture in his hand, and placed it on Lama Tsongkhapa's head, bestowing a blessing. The next morning, while reading the pundit's text, when reading Bhavaviveka's text. Remember, Bhavaviveka wrote a commentary to fundamental wisdom called, appropriately, Buddhapalita. That was one name of the text. I think it has another formal name. But anyway, while reading that text entitled Buddhapalita, Tsongkhapa gained definitive ascertainment of the distinction between the objects of negation according to the consequentialist and autonomist schools. Oh, using big words. Well, the objects of negation. Remember, what is to be negated for the autonomous school? That would be the Svatantrikas. What is the object of negation there? John, do you know? You're there you go. You're unmuted.
Sorry, I missed, I apologize, I missed the question.
So what is the object of negation for the Svatantrikas when you're talking about
True existence.
true existence? And the object of negation for the consequentialists, that means the Prasangikas?
Intrinsic or inherent realities.
Right. It includes true existence, but the
Would include.
slight difference. So he came to understand, gained definitive ascertainment, certainty about the distinction between the objects of negation according to the Prasangika and the Svatantrika schools. All of his mental elaborations, grasping at signs, I mean, signs of true existence and inherent existence, were destroyed by the power of gaining faith through understanding the teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. He composed the prayer in praise of dependent origination. Since that time, an auspicious dependent relationship is also created whenever his followers read that prayer. Okay, so that was the commentary. Geshe Lekso translated that from a Tibetan text, which was explaining this tanka in that little portion of it. So if we go to the next page where there's a enlargement of that little portion, you see Nagarjuna at the top. So where is Buddhapalita in that picture?
It must be right, the one holding the text and touching Tsongkhapa's head, right?
Yeah. So we can tell that, at least we know that's Buddhapalita. Does anyone know from the usual images of the others which one might be Aryadeva? I think, I didn't check. I don't know if in the, there's also a video on YouTube of Geshe Leksok. Is that right, Doris? He's explaining, he's going through these tankas also?
Yes, but he didn't say which one is which. I kind of thought it was Aryadeva was the one on the right. Or sorry, on the left.
Oh, no. Okay. I think, I'm not sure. I think it's the one on the right who is debating, and you see he has this.
I mean the right. I mean the right. Sorry.
He seems to be debating because he was renowned for that. So amongst the others, you have to have Chandrakirti and Bhavaviveka. So I'm not sure which of those. Does anyone have a educated guess from seeing tankas of those images and what they're traditionally imagined to be doing? Okay, you can do some research if you're interested. So let me read this segment from Thupten Jinpa's biography of Lama Tsongkhapa. It's titled Tsongkhapa, a Buddha in the Land of Snows. It's the section called Tsongkhapa's Breakthrough. And I don't have the physical text. I didn't have the physical text in front of me, so I couldn't tell the page number from the PDF, but I copied it. So this is talking about the same story. So content with what he had been able to achieve in Nyal, remember we just mentioned that a moment ago, this region near Wolka, where Lama Tsongkhapa did this long retreat, where I mentioned that I had a chance to visit. Paul, when you were in Tibet, did you visit Wolka?
I don't believe I did. I mean, I might have passed through it, but I didn't actually get a chance to visit.
I went with Serkon Senshop Rinpoche's attendant Nawang and the Venerable Thupten Chodron and the Venerable Zia, an Egyptian nun. We went on pilgrimage. We went to Lama Latso, the lake of Pelden Lamo, and coming back, I think we went through Woka and visited the hermitage where Lama Tsongkhapa had done the 100,000 prostrations to each of the 35 Buddhas. So it was 3.5 million prostrations and 4 million mandala offerings or something. I can't remember. So many different things. So content with what he had been able to achieve in Yale, Tsongkhapa and his group, by now over 30 in number, returned once again to the retreat in Woka Valley, known as Lading, gods floating in the air. He would remain there for a full year, continuing with his intensive meditative practice and conducting teachings for the small band of wandering contemplative monks. Throughout all this, taking to heart what his meditational deity Manjushri had advised during their last encounter. So Lama Tsongkhapa would often ask Manjushri advice. So in their last encounter, Manjushri had said that he should critically reflect on the great treatises and compare them against Manjushri's own oral instructions. Tsongkhapa redoubled his efforts in the ongoing quest for deeper insight into emptiness. One night he had a prophetic dream. What did the other one say? Portent or something, in which he saw Nagarjuna surrounded by 4 of his principal interpreters, Aryadeva, who was from the 2nd century, Buddhapalita, 5th century, Bhavaviveka, 6th century, and Chandrakirti, 7th century, engaged in deep conversation. Does that seem right? Did Bhavaviveka 6th century, but Buddhapalita 5th century? Who is criticizing whom?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that sounds right,
Yeah.
Venerable.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Buddhapalita presented it, Bhavaviveka criticized him, Chandrakirti defended Buddhapalita.
Right. So it has a correct order there. He saw these Nagarjuna surrounded by 4 of his disciples engaged in deep conversation. Then one of the figures, said to be Buddhapalita, came over to Tsongkhapa bearing a wrapped text and touched the top of his head with it. So although that image doesn't appear in Thupten Jinpa's book, you can see, as Doris had pointed out, it seems like the one monk with the pundit's hat who's standing up and placing the text on Lama Tsongkhapa's text, that must represent Buddhapalita. Following the symbolism of his dream, the next morning Tsongkhapa plunged into Buddhapalita's exposition of Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle way. Tsongkhapa read and read, reflecting every now and then, and meditating on crucial points of Buddhapalita's presentation of the philosophy of emptiness. As Tsongkhapa was reading and meditating on the 18th chapter, which is the analysis of self and phenomena. So some of you may be familiar with the various chapters of fundamental wisdom, but this is good to sort of know, to hear again and again. So this is the 18th chapter is talking about analysis of self and phenomena. All of a sudden, everything became crystal clear to Lama Tsongkhapa. All of Tsongkhapa's long-standing doubts, especially regarding how to find the extremely fine line demarcating what is negated in emptiness and what is left untouched, vanished without a trace. Does that make sense linguistically? Does everyone understand what that means? Yeah? No one seems to be doubting. It seems clear. He felt that nothing whatsoever was left for possible objectification. No object, no basis, no ground. So everything became, you realized the emptiness of all of these phenomena. Yet there was no danger in that realization, not even the slightest hint of collapsing into nihilism or some kind of ineffable absolutism. So he had no danger when he found this correct view, there was no danger in falling into nihilism. One example of which would be, that phenomena didn't exist at all, or into absolutism, where things were truly existent and so forth. Paradoxically, instead of being demolished, the world of cause and effect, right and wrong, samsara and nirvana, seemed even more clear and regulated. So Khapa knew exactly what Nagarjuna meant when he wrote centuries earlier, so from Nagarjuna's treatise, to whom emptiness is possible, for them all is possible. To whom emptiness is impossible, someone thought that phenomena couldn't be empty, for them nothing is possible. Well, what that means is that, from their point of view, logically, things can't exist if they're not empty of inherent existence. Later, speaking of the impact of his experience, Tsongkhapa would tell his attendants the following. These days, with greater familiarity, talking about his insight into emptiness, even in post-meditation periods, I would have the perception of this entire world of diversity. What does that mean? What's that? That's world of diversity means what? Paul, do you know that?
I assume that's what usually translated as the variety of things.
Yeah, jinepa, as opposed to jitawa. So jitawa means the emptiness, and jinepa, or the diversity, refers to conventionalities. Even in post-meditation periods, I would have the perception of this entire world of diversity, all the conventional things, as being empty, yet in an illusion-like manner, maintaining its specific forms. And the perception of things as not sealed or marked by the awareness of their emptiness as objective facts with intrinsic reality rarely arises in me now. So, he felt that as a result of that blessing in his dream by Buddhapalita, he had this deep insight into emptiness. So I wanted to share that with you, just to encourage you also, if you would like to download the PDF, which this Tanka that we were talking about, Tanka 10, it has all 15 Tankas. Which one, what is that titled, Doris, on the things that you downloaded?
I've already forgot.
It's called the Chintamani Rosary, spreading the Buddha's
About
teaching.
halfway through the notes of the chats there, it says LTK _ bio _ Chintama. So it doesn't get the whole title. So if you download that, that has all explanation of all 15 tankas. So very, very useful to know that. This is sort of the story, the biography. Also to read Thupten Jinpa's biography of Lama Tsongkhapa. So inspiring. But particularly this particular instance is relevant to our studies because we've been talking very much recently about Bhava Viveka and Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti's, sort of critique of Bhava Viveka afterwards. So that will come up in today's class a little bit later. I just wanted to share that with you first. How are we doing? Anyone have any questions about what we just talked about? Yeah, Sean.
I mean, I'm still not sure how to view this because the where it says, he felt that nothing whatsoever was left for possible objectification, no object, no basis, no ground. Yet there was no danger, not even the slightest hint of collapsing in denialism or some kind of ineffable absolutism.
Right.
I mean, I guess when you're in a meditative state where there's no object, no basis, no ground, I guess I'm still having a hard time understanding how
No,
you
so he's
maintain
talking about,
the conceptual reality when that's the state you're in.
he's talking about is he talking about deep meditation on emptiness or in post meditation? First of all, Sean.
Well, the first one, that first sentence sounds like he's
Sentence that
in
you just said.
meditation.
Say again?
And I mean, the first sentence sounds like he's in meditation if there's no object, no basis, no ground.
I have to open this up again. So what does it say there?
I mean, I guess it's
He
just
felt that nothing.
part of it is like me not understanding how to apply this in my
Right,
daily
right.
life.
So I just want to get I want to get the right sentence. Is that in the paragraph that starts, he felt that nothing whatsoever was left
Yes.
for possible objectification. So that means in post meditation, he realized that all of the conventional phenomena were not suitable to be truly existent or inherently existent. He didn't objectify them in that way. There was no object, no basis, no ground. Yet there was no, even doing so, there was no danger of collapsing into nihilism or absolutism. So even though he recognized in post meditation that he had this understanding that phenomena were dependent arisings and so forth, there was no danger of falling into these two extremes of nihilism or absolutism or whatever you like to call it. What's usually the opposite? What's the translation of the opposite of nihilism?
Eternalism?
Pluralism, or here he says absolutism. Yeah. Nadine, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable George. I wanted to tell you exactly the same book, the same chapter. I've written one page here in my book where I write a note for our Gongpa Rapsal.
Yes.
I've written of the step exactly the same chapter, only a few pages later.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Yeah. So the biography that Thupten Jinpa produced of Lama Tsong Khapa, very, very good. If you get a chance, when you get your income tax refund or your birthday present, it's a very good book to have. There's also an ebook if you like to keep it on your tablet and so forth. Okay. Anything else before we start with our class material again? Yeah, Nadine?
A short question. Before Buddha Shakyamuni was born, was it a dark age on Earth?
I didn't catch the whole question. Before Shakyamuni,
Before Guru Shakyamuni Buddha was born on this planet Earth, was it a dark age the years before, the centuries before?
oh, yeah. Yeah. I think so. I'm not sure if Venerable Losang Bunsok was going like this, that it was not a dark age. I think there are varying degrees of dark age, right? When the Buddha Dharma doesn't exist. So the Buddha Dharma that had been taught by the previous Buddha was no longer well understood. There might have been people who went to Swayambhu and Bodhanath, where supposedly relics of previous Buddhas were. There were some kinds of people that had faith like this and that. But for the most part, I don't think anyone would call themselves a Buddhist at that time. Before the day before Buddha was born, or So that's sort of like the instituting of the turning of the wheel of Dharma is when the period from a dark age into a period of the existence of the Buddha Dharma, when there can be lives of leisure and endowment. Before that, the people who were born when the Buddha had not turned the wheel of Dharma, at that moment they didn't have a perfect human rebirth because there was no Buddha Dharma that they could understand. But during their life, if they were alive when Buddha was born and they heard his teachings later, they would have a newly attained perfect human rebirth during their life. It's like someone born in China, 20 years ago, when there was no possibility of listening to the Dharma, then immigrating to New York City and having, the chance to hear so many Dharma teachings and so forth. So they suddenly would have they would newly attain a perfect human rebirth during that lifetime. Their rebirth would be requalified that way.
Thank you.
Make sense? Yeah. Okay. Shankar, you have one last question.
I was just thinking, the reason I was shaking my head is I guess I misinterpreted Nadine's question. I thought she was asking whether we were in a dark eon, but that's a different, because we're in a light eon at the moment. We just were, before the current Buddha turned the wheel, we just happened to be in a totally degenerated state of Buddha Dharma, right? That's what you're meaning.
Right. So say, for instance, Guru Shakyamuni's teachings have already begun to decline in terms of how easy it is to make realizations. Much more difficult now to make realizations. Understanding that people have, and so forth, compared to the time when Buddha Shakyamuni was alive. And there will be various periods, 500 years interspersed between them, when various qualities are decreased, till we get to the point where, again, people don't know much about the meaning of the Dharma. They might still be reverence. They would circumambulate stupas, Bodh Gaya, and so forth, but there wouldn't be much understanding. That would be kind of like a dark age, okay, or degenerate age. Okay, so we are in our text, the section in Thupten Jinpa's text called Reflecting Objections Raised Against Such a Refutation, which is Thupten Jinpa's book, page 171. And
271, you mean, Venerable, right?
oh, yes. Thank you for correcting that. 271 in Jinpa's text. Is that right? So, and then the FPMT text, authored, translated by Venerable Joan Nysel, page 149. So what was just refuted? It says, rejecting objections raised against such a refutation. What was just refuted? Stephen, do you remember? Stephen, you there?
Yeah.
You're thinking.
I'm just trying to find my place in the ebook here. So I'm at the heading, the consequence that ultimate arising would not be negated.
Right. There were various consequences that the Arya's meditative equipoise would destroy phenomena and so forth and so on. There were 3 or 4 different consequences, but they all, what was being refuted was inherent existence, right? The Svatantrikas would like to say that inherent existence exists conventionally. Lama Tsongkhapa says, and Svatantrika would say, but it doesn't exist ultimately. Lama Tsongkhapa said, it does. Of course, it doesn't exist ultimately, but it doesn't even exist conventionally. So that was what was being refuted. So now the Svatantrika is coming back, some defenders of Svatantrika, like Venerable Losam Bunsok, or sometimes some people in this class, sometimes they want to defend Svatantrika somehow. So this is the things they're raising. Objection. If arising by virtue of intrinsic characteristic does not exist on the level of both truths, so that means if there's not inherent production, remember that's what Chandrakirti is negating, not negating simply true, true production from the point of view of Svatantrika, but actually inherent production. If arising by virtue of intrinsic characteristic does not exist on both levels of truth, the Svatantrika say, it must exist on both levels of truth. If it weren't, form and so on would become non-existent. If things don't have inherent existence, forms and so forth would not exist. They're equating existence and inherent existence, right? In that case, the perception of the reality of form and so on by cognitions, by that of the eyes and so on, would be impossible in the world. In that case, the perception of the reality of forms and so on. So Venerable Jones, what does she say at that point? So she translates that objection. If production, which is established by way of its own character, does not exist with respect to both the two truths, forms and so forth would not exist. That'd be the Svatantrika position. There must be inherent existence, otherwise they wouldn't exist. If that were the case, if forms did not exist, I consciousness and so forth would not observe the entities of forms and so forth. So Jimpa has said here, the reason I read that, in that case, the perception of the reality of forms, she translates just the entities of forms. I think that's more what's talking about. The translation of Ngopo as reality in this case, that seems to imply some kind of true existence or something, or emptiness and so forth. Here it's just the entities of forms and so forth. You would not observe the entities of forms and so forth in the world. On the other hand, in the FNT translation, if that were not the case, even the horns of a rabbit and so forth would appear to eye consciousnesses and so forth for the very same reason. So this is all from the opponent's point of view, right? This is not Chandrakirti's position. This is not Lama Tsongkhapa's position. This is this theoretical objection. So let me read again what Jimpa said there. Otherwise, non-existing things like a rabbit's horns could be perceived by cognitions such as those of the eyes and so on. The reason is exactly the same in both cases. Who can explain what that phrase means? John, are you still there? Are you off camera or are you off? I was going to ask you. Okay. What do you think, Paul?
I am here, but I'm sorry.
Say again?
I'm happy for Paul to today.
You didn't understand? Anyone understand what he said?
Okay. So I just thought my connection's not so good.
Oh, okay, okay. Don't worry. Paul, what does that last phrase mean? Otherwise, non-existent things like a rabbit's horn could be perceived by eye consciousness and so on.
I think what he's saying is that if there isn't, the Svatantrika position is that if there isn't some level of reality, inherent existence, then all phenomena and non-existent things like the horns of a rabbit, there would be no difference between them. And
Right.
therefore you could see one just as well as another. I think
Right.
that's what he's saying.
Right. His first statement was saying, if they're not inherently existent, you couldn't see them. Now he's saying, on the other hand, if you could see them, even though they were not inherently existent, even though they were inherently existent, then you would be able to see, non-existent things like the horns of a rabbit. I don't think I phrased that correctly. Could you say again, Paul, how you said that second part?
I was just saying, I think it's the position of the Svatantrikas that unless there is some degree of inherent existence, then essentially they're saying if things don't have some inherent existence, then they're effectively completely non-existent, and there would be no difference between them and something that is universally considered non-existent, the horns of a rabbit. And so
Right.
therefore you could see the horns of a rabbit just as much as you could see anything else, because both lack inherent existence.
Right. So sometimes Chandrakirti uses the example of the horns of a rabbit. Sometimes he's used in other commentaries, maybe in the 400 stanzas, the horns of a donkey, because a donkey's long ears. I'm not sure why that's the case. I'm not sure if he uses the example here in his own commentary, the Basham, the horns of a donkey, but he does use that in some of his other commentaries. So to respond to this, so this is the objection of the Svatantrikas. To respond to this, the text reads in verses 37 and 38, the first two lines of 38 from the Madhyamakavatara Karikas. Empty things dependent on convergences, which is Jimpa's, I don't know why he likes to change the word sometimes. It means collection, it means dependent on a collection of things or convergence of things, such as reflections and so forth, are not unknown. Empty things dependent on convergences, such as reflections and so on, are not unknown. And just as from an empty thing, like a reflection, a perception can arise that bears its form, in the same way, likewise, although all things are empty, they do arise from emptiness in a robust way. Okay. He's waxing poetic here. He's rather than using this usual translation of things. Anyway, so when it says empty things, what do you think it's talking about here? Stephen, what do you think? What is
in this case? I think empty things that exist, but specifically things that are produced, like a reflection in a mirror.
right? So a reflection in a mirror, how is that empty? In the context of this verse, how is that empty?
It's empty of being an actual face.
Right. It's not empty of true existence. That's not what's being talked about. Of course, it's empty of true existence. It's empty of inherent existence. But when we're talking about empty things here, that means things that look one way but are not that, like the reflection of your face in a mirror, or the reflection of a moon in a pond. To an animal who's looking at that, who's not versed in the world, it looks like the moon is down there, right? So that's empty of that reflection of the moon in the pond is empty of being an actual moon. So that's kind of the sense of empty here. Empty things that are dependent on a collection of things, such as the mirror and the face and the consciousness perceiving them and so forth. They are not unknown. It means they're known, right? They are not unknown. In the Tibetan, it's even more difficult with the grammar. Anyway, and just as from an empty thing, like a reflection, a perception can arise that bears its form. So even though the reflection of a face in a mirror is empty of being a face, in that sense, it can still give rise to a perception of a face, right? You see your reflection in the mirror. In the same way, although all things are empty, now I think he's meaning empty of inherent existence, they do arise from emptiness in a robust way, or as Venerable Joan translated, empty things, reflections and so forth, that depend upon a collection, that's what Jimpa says, convergence, are not even not renowned. Not even not renowned. That's what, in this case, I think Thupten Jipa's translation synthesizes that better. They are not unknown. That means they're known, right? Venerable Jones' translation. Empty things, reflections, and so forth that depend on a collection are not even not renowned, just as for that form empty, just as for that, is that right? Just as for that from empty reflections and so forth, consciousnesses in their aspect are produced. Just as for that
From.
But in the text I have, unless it's been corrected in your version, it says, just as for that from empty reflections and so forth. Do you have a corrected version? Or are you just correcting this? Okay. Just as from empty reflections and so forth, consciousnesses in their aspects are produced. Maybe in her text, the words for that are not meant to be there. Just as from empty reflections and so forth, consciousnesses in their aspect are produced.
Venerable George,
Yes.
I think I'm looking at Betsy Knapper's translation. I think for that is what Betsy translates as here, just as here from
Okay.
those empty reflections. I think that's
Right. Thank you. Just as here from empty reflections and so forth, consciousnesses in their aspect are produced. Likewise, even if all things are empty, they are strongly produced, or as Jimpa says, robustly, they are strongly produced from those that are empty. Okay, so this is a very important verse, and it's talking about something that has a lot of implications. So say, for instance, even though something is a falsity, like the reflection of a face in a mirror is not really a face, still it can give rise to a consciousness. So that's used as an analogy to say that even though forms which are actually empty of inherent existence, they can actually give rise to their effects also. Let's see, in Jitar Derni, yes, in the Tibetan text it says Jitar Derni, so here, right? Okay. Okay, so far, does that make sense? We're just sort of ourselves analyzing the verse. Now, in the Bhasham, Chandrakirti will explain what he meant in that karika, that verse, and Lama Tsongkhapa is going to be, giving his own interpretation of that. So here he says, in Jipa's translation, empty things such as reflections and so on. And again, in this case, the empty means they're not really a face or reflection of whatever. So they're empty in that sense. Empty things such as reflections and so on including echoes and the like, arise dependent on a collection of causes and conditions, or convergences of causes and conditions. So, and then explaining the meeting of the mirror and face. So before you put your face in front of the mirror, there's no reflection in the mirror. As soon as you put your face there, there is the meeting of the mirror and face, right? Or the meeting of a cave and the issuing of sound. So when within a cave, there is something that makes a sound, that's the coming together of a collection of conditions, right? Such things are not unknown to the world. In other words, they are well known. And just as from something known to the world, an empty or false thing like a reflection, a perception, and just as from something known to the world, an empty or false thing like a reflection, a perception such as that of the eyes can arise that bears its form, that of a reflection and the like. In other words, from a false thing like a mirror image, there can be produced a perception bearing that false aspect. Right? Likewise, although all things are empty of existence through their intrinsic characteristics, or you could say, likewise, even though all things are empty of inherent existence, from causes that are empty of such an existence, effects that are empty of such an existence do arise in a robust way. They strongly arise. They definitely arise. Does that make sense? What do you think, Karen? Does that make sense to you? No? Makes no sense, right? What's he talking about? John, how is your bandwidth back on?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, not good audio there, but can you paraphrase that for Karen's sake? What's Lama Tsong Khapa saying here?
I believe what he's saying is that the just because causes.
I think it's too difficult for us to understand what you're saying. Either you need to get some AirPods or something, or plug in a microphone. Paul, can you paraphrase that?
Sure, Venerable George. I think all he's really saying is that just because things are empty of inherent existence doesn't mean that causality is negated. So just as from something that lacks inherent existence can serve as a cause, there's a result that is also empty of inherent existence.
Right. And so when he was saying here, likewise, although all things that are empty of existence through their intrinsic characteristics, likewise, although all things are empty of inherent existence, from causes that are empty of inherent existence, effects that are empty of inherent existence do arise strongly, and without doubt. So, say, for instance, from an illusory horse, if you produce an emanation of a horse, or you make an illusion of a horse, not an emanation of a horse, like the magician that makes an illusion of a horse, there can be effects of that. Even though that's a false thing, there can be the perception to the eye consciousness of those individuals who fell under the sway of the magician's spell, right? And so it does have effects. And in the same way, things that are false in the sense of being not existing the way that they appear, conventionalities. They don't exist the way that they appear. They appear to be inherently existent, but they are empty of being inherently existent. And so you could call them false also. We usually call conventionalities falsities in that sense. They can give rise to some effect. When we said from causes that are empty of such existence, empty of inherent existence, like the appearance of a form and so forth, the effects, there can arise effects that are empty of inherent existence. So when that quotation we were reading earlier about Lama Tsongkhapa's, realization after having been blessed, what he dreamt being blessed by Buddhapalita, having put the text Buddhapalita on his head, and then he read Buddhapalita later. He said that in post-meditation, all of these things were, congruent with one another, that from empty phenomena, there could be empty results and so forth. So then next paragraph, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary reads, here, Chandrakirti speaking of the arising of a visual perception on the basis of a mirror image. Here, Chandrakirti speaks of the arising of a visual perception on the basis of a mirror image, right? Now, a mirror image is a conditioned thing. It's a thing, yeah. I'm not sure. Let's say the Tibetan, when he says here, dear Suknyen le leni Daishin be mikshe kewa sungbe Zuknyen ngopo yin. So it just means it is a ngopo. It's a functioning thing. Now, a mirror image, Jimpa says, is a conditioned thing. That means it's a ngopo. Remember when we studied mind and mental factors and tenets and so forth? Ngopo had various meanings. One was just, the general meaning means it's a phenomena which is impermanent. It's a, what's the usual way of translating ngopo?
Production?
No, I don't think so.
Robo, you mean Dao Nga, I don't know, Sa Nga
Right.
Naropo? Just functional thing or thing.
Functioning thing, right? Functioning thing or functional thing or just sometimes thing. So when he says conditioned thing, I'm not sure how that works here. A mirror image is a ngopo. It's something that is able to produce an effect. It is a thing. So it's something that's impermanent also. So things that are, we say ngopo, things that are impermanent, functioning things can have effects, and they themselves arise from causes and so forth. Now, a mirror image is a ngopo, a functioning thing. And since it is different in nature from cognition, it is an external reality. So this is coming back to a question that Stephen asked the other day about when we were talking about the Prasangika point of view, there is an external reality. Whereas from the mind-only school, Stephen, what?
There is no view of external reality. Everything arises as from the same substance. So like sorry, let me get the word straight. The internal, the subject and object arise from the same karmic seed in the alaya vijnana. They are not of different substances, so there is no external reality.
Right, but not exactly right, because Geshe Zopa used to emphasize that for Chittamatra, if you check, they do say that let's say, if you're looking at my mug here, my drinking mug, that is an external object, but it's not an external object that is a different nature than the mind itself. So there's a slight subtle difference there. But anyway, that's generally the case. So Lama Tsongkhapa's text says, now a mirror image is a functional thing, a conditioned thing. And since it is different in nature from cognition, this is the Prasangika point of view, it is an external reality. Furthermore, since it is the objective condition of a visual perception, objective condition means in Tibetan is mikkhen. So generally there have to be three conditions, right, for any kind of perception to arise. Nadine, do you remember what the three conditions have to be for something for consciousness to arise?
I'm sorry, I wanted to write down what you said about external object in the Chitta Matra because I find it so important. That's why I didn't really listen. I'm sorry.
Okay. So let me just read here. I think I put, did I put Geshe Zopa's commentary? Yeah. So Geshe Zopa said the following on July 26th in 2002 in the morning. So he said, so therefore, in this, that means here, there was a word here somewhere earlier. That means especially in the Prasangika system. Here it is different than the Yogacara, right? Or Chittamatra. Yogacara and Chittamatra generally are synonymous. Here, I consciousness is produced from a reflection. That reflection of the moon or the reflection of a face in a mirror is produced from faulty things, things that don't exist the way that they appear, right? That reflection itself is some kind of form. It is a physical thing. What do you think about that? The reflection, like say if you talk about your face itself is a thing, right? A functioning thing. What about the reflection of the face? There's a little bit of doubt. Here, the Prasangika position is, and Chandrakirti's position is that the reflection itself is also a functioning thing. The reflection of the moon or the reflection of a face in a mirror, faulty things. The reflection itself is some kind of form, physical thing. It will actually produce this I consciousness. So therefore, that I consciousness and reflection out there are not the same entity. We know that. The Prasangika point of view is that our I consciousness and that which gives rise to the I consciousness, which is out there, something not the same substance as the I consciousness. So therefore, that I consciousness and reflection out there are not the same entity as the Yogacaras would have. So this is all talking about, although the word Yogacara doesn't enter into the commentary here, this is what it's talking about, sort of refuting various positions of the Yogacara. Geshe Zopa continued, first, object of I consciousness arises. Okay, so Stephen will have a question about this later. So first, the object of I consciousness rises. So that would be its mikkhen, right? That means its objective condition. That has to be there first, because there's a causal sequence here. Then I consciousness rises from that. So therefore, they are cause and effect. What's the cause? The reflection. Let's say if you're talking about I consciousness of seeing your face in the mirror. And the effect is the I consciousness rising. They are different entities. Causality is Cause and effect are always different substances, different entities. Cause and effect are always different entities from the Prasangika point of view. Just let me read a little bit further, Louise, and we'll take a break. Thanks for reminding me there. Rachel is there in her sun hat, I see, joined us on the beach. Okay, causality, it means cause and effect are always different substances, different entities. They cannot be the same entity or the same nature. So first the cause, and then from that, result. Cause always precedes results. So therefore here, even the reflection and the I consciousness which sees that reflection, these are causally related. That reflection is also a ngopo. It's a functioning thing. It is not non-existent. It exists. It is a functioning thing. Why does it function? Because it produces a result. Since the ngopo, the functioning thing, or Jimpa says conditioned thing, and its shepa, its consciousness, the consciousness that perceives it, are different nature, the object is a different nature than its consciousness. Therefore, in this system, this Prasangika system, therefore this system establish again accepting external objects. Remember, we mentioned this before in various situations. So for the Prasangika, what did we just say here? Therefore, in this system, accepting external objects. So from the Prasangika point of view, there is the existence of external objects that are of a different entity than the consciousness that perceives them. For Yogacara, as Stephen had pointed out, they always would arise from the same seed. So there's not that same kind of causal relationship of one preceding the other. They would be simultaneous. What did he say? Ultimately existing external objects are refuted, but general conventionally external object is accepted. So Prasangika doesn't say that the external objects exist ultimately or truly, but they exist conventionally, and that's accepted by the Prasangika. They accept their conventional existence of those external objects. You can't say the external object and the inner subject are the same nature. You cannot say the inner consciousness transfers into the object. Because there are objects there, external objects, that object is also the object condition of I consciousness. The mikshegi mikyen. So mikyen means the objective condition of the three kinds of conditions. So Geshe is going to explain that here. He said, I consciousness, or for that matter, any consciousness, has three conditions. Ken sum. Ken means condition, sum means three, right? Mik ken, the objective condition. Demadakyen. Do you remember, Rachel, what demadakyen means?
So it's going to be not the Tibetan, I don't remember, but I know the three, which are the object, the I consciousness, the I faculty, and the consciousness are needed.
So the Demadakyan means the immediately preceding condition, which would be an immediately preceding moment of I consciousness. Or if you're talking about the first moment that I consciousness arises, There wasn't a previous moment of eye consciousness, right? You just sort of, in the morning, you open your eyes for the first time, right? So that first, the Dhammadakyan, the preceding, I would say, immediately preceding condition means immediately preceding moment of mental consciousness that gave rise to that first moment of eye consciousness. So there are three, this kensum, mikyan, Dhammadakyan, that means immediately preceding condition, and the dakyan, that means the what?
The own empowering condition.
The empowering condition, yeah. Dak here because like dakpo means the boss, right? So the boss condition, that means the faculty itself. So there have to be those three conditions. There has to be if you're talking about visual consciousness, there has to be the eye faculty and an objective condition that is an external object, can be even the reflection of a face in the mirror, and a preceding moment of eye consciousness. Those conditions, when they come together, they can give rise to the eye consciousness, to the new eye consciousness. The preceding moment of eye consciousness can transform into the next moment. That means that they are produced from the three conditions, kensum le kewa. So mikbe ken, or mikken, is the object. The condition, cause, and condition. Dakken is the organ, or we said the dominant condition, or the faculty itself, the organ. And the Dhammadakyan is the immediate condition, another consciousness that immediately preceded it. Okay? The main object of eye consciousness, it's mikkan, that the object condition, that is a visual form entrance, zuki keche. Remember when we talked about these three things, we talked about what? The 6 faculties, the 12 entrances, and the 18 dhatus, right? Is that right? So what's the difference between the 12 entrances and the 18 dhatus, or 18 spheres? John, do you know? Did you get earplugs? Or
Is this any better?
That's a little bit better, yeah.
On? Okay,
Okay, I'm giving up on Tibet House. You're in Tibet House, right? Or in Robert Thurman's home. Where are you?
Oh.
Okay. Don't know either of that. Okay. So what were we just saying here?
You are asking about the differences between the 12 and the 18.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
12 things are yeah. I think my connection's not good.
It's too intermittent. Well, we won't understand even if you say it perfectly. So when we're talking about the 6 faculties, you're just talking about 6 things: the eye faculty or eye organ, the subtle matter in the retina, the nose organ, the ear organ, the taste organ, the tactile sensation organ. When you talk about entrances, they are the conditions that are necessary to give rise to a consciousness. So they would be the 6 objects, the 5 objects of the outer senses, right? And the 6th object of mind. Let's say the 6 objects that would be visual forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, and objects of mental consciousness. So there's 6 objects. And then what would the other 6 of the 12 entrances be? Stephen has fallen asleep.
Would you repeat that again?
So when we talk about entrances, we talk about these 12 things which are doorways for the production of consciousness. So they don't produce they're not consciousness themselves. What are the second set of 6 of those 12 entrances?
Oh,
The faculties.
We said the objects and the faculties, right? Is that right? So we have 6 objects of the 6 senses. That means the 6th one being mental consciousness, and then the 6 faculties. When you talk about the 18 dhatus, you have those 12 entrances plus the 6 consciousnesses. So you come up with 18, okay? So Geshe-la said, the main object of eye consciousness, the mikyan, that is the visual form entrance. So when we talk about entrances or keche, or in Sanskrit, ayatana, the visual form entrance or ayatana is the visual forms themselves, shapes and colors. Physical things are divided into 5 entrances. Physical things are divided into 5 entrances. So I guess that would mean giving up the objects of mental consciousness. You're talking about the objects of the 5 senses. They are physical things. Physical things are divided into 5 entrances. So visual form entrance means the form or physical thing which is visible to eye consciousness. That is color and shape. Usually we say the domain of eye consciousness is shapes and colors, right? Then the physical things which are able to be heard by the ear consciousness, those objects are the sound entrance. Same thing for smell entrance, taste entrance, and so forth. You know already the 5 keches, the reflection to the eye consciousness, whatever appears, that reflection is a form entrance. So this is sort of radical. This is saying the reflection itself is not only a physical thing, it is a form entrance. That means it can give rise to eye consciousness. So it's giving some kind of validity to those reflections. All of these are the same thing. The appearance of 2 moons, hair falling down, or something magical that appears, including echoes and so forth. All of these are to be known in the same way. Those objects are physical things that each produce different sense consciousnesses. So yeah, we would say, in the West, we would say echo. Yeah, that's quite clear that that's a physical thing because it's a sound, right? It's just the fact that it's reflected off the wall and has some falsity in the sense that it, like where is it, in the Sistine Chapel? Did they have that kind of thing where you stand in one place and then you can hear the conversation very clearly in another? Maybe that's in certain chapels. I know in Italy that's like that.
yeah, and in India too, like lots of places like that. Yeah.
So all of these things are to be known in the same way. Those objects are physical things that each produce different sense consciousnesses. So they are the mikyan, the object conditions. They themselves and consciousnesses are different entities, and you should understand it that way. Okay. So just let me read that paragraph there, and we'll take a break. Here, Chandrakirti speaks of the arisal of visual perception on the basis of a mirror image. Now, a mirror image is a ngopo, a conditioned thing or functioning thing, And since it is different in nature from cognition, it is an external reality. Furthermore, since it is the objective condition of visual perception, Chandrakirti takes it to be a visual form, right? We should also discern from this the status of phenomena such as a double moon. So for Chandrakirti, what does a double moon mean? Is that like something rare takes place, astrological situation? What does a double moon mean, Don? Do you know?
I think it means a falsity.
Yeah, like for instance, if you stick your finger in your eye in a certain way, you can kind of see two of everything, right? So if there's some impairment of your eye, you see a double moon. Because that gives rise to a visual consciousness, even a double moon would be what? A form. What did I say? What was the term we're using here? A visual form. Even a double moon would be a visual form. The appearance of floating hairs to someone with floaters, I have sometimes, you see things falling down. The appearance of floating hairs, of course, the things that are floating in your eye, those are physical things. We're not talking about that. The appearance of them also is a visual form. Mirages, okay, to get your mind around this, a mirage gives rise to a visual consciousness, right? So mirages are also visible forms, as well as echoes and similar examples. Okay, let's take a break. How are we doing? Making sense?
Oh.
I want to ask Karen first. Karen, how making a little more sense?
Yes, it's making sense.
Okay.
But there's still falsities.
They're still
They're falsities.
They're still falsities.
Okay.
They're external objects. They're impermanent and so forth, but they do exist as physical visual forms. Shankar, you had something?
I was just going to say, from my understanding, to summarize this paragraph, basically what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, that even if something is a falsity, it is still a functioning thing and a form, and it's a functioning thing because it can give rise to effects.
Some falsities. How about the horns of a rabbit? Are they falsities?
Yes, but that's not a functioning thing.
It's not a functioning thing, right? Right.
Yeah. So
Rachel?
yes, you're right. Okay, I get your point. Yes.
Rachel, what do you think?
So two things. One is that what about somebody who's delusional? They have the appearance arise, and then they have some sort of an I consciousness that arises from that appearance.
Do they, or do they, like, say, for instance, someone who's schizophrenic who hears voices?
They think that they have.
Right. Does their ear consciousness hear that voice?
Yeah.
So in the case of a mirage, it's actually the eye consciousness that sees the mirage, right?
Right.
In the case of someone who's schizophrenic, is it their ear consciousness that's hearing the sound, or is it a mental
projection onto that?
So something to be analyzed.
Well, similarly, also a dream, right? I mean, in a dream, are we, our eye consciousness is not seeing what is appearing, even though it seems like we're seeing something visually, right?
Right. So is a dream a dream car? Is that a physical object?
I would say no.
Oh, no. So is it a visual form?
I would say no.
Does it give rise to eye consciousness? Usually in a dream, you're sense consciousnesses are not functioning, right?
Right.
And we talked about this in another context earlier, but let's take a little break now. This isn't, there we go. We're back recording. We had some lively discussion during the break about various things. So Shanka was saying that he's never seen the horns of a rabbit, so he can't have a mental image of it. But of course, no one has ever seen the horns of a rabbit. They may have seen a rabbit whose ears were sticking up in the grass out in front of their house on a foggy morning, and they thought, oh, that rabbit has horns. Or they may have seen someone's painting of a rabbit with horns on it. That Geshe joke when he taught us Dura and various subjects. He used to have this postcard that was, what do they call it? A jackalope?
Jackalope, yeah.
Jackalope.
Jackalope.
And he would hold it. And then there was this one monk, Helmut Holm, the venerable Helmut. He would hold it up to Helmut, and Helmut couldn't resist laughing so much. So you can imagine, even if you've never seen an image or something, if someone says the horns of a rabbit, you know what a rabbit is, you know what horns are, you can imagine superimposing horns on a rabbit. So that's not impossible to conjure up that image. But that's not something that we're talking about here. Here we're talking about the image of a mirage or the appearance of floating hairs. Those all are physical things that can give rise to consciousness. So they're considered to be visual forms and so forth. And echoes would be considered to be auditory forms and so forth. Okay, let's continue on. The existence of things by virtue of intrinsic characteristics, so things existing inherently, which is perceived by the conditions of any of the 5 unimpaired senses. So is that true? So any of the unimpaired senses, so good senses, you've got good faculties, they all perceive their individual phenomena. The eyes see visual forms, the ears hear sound, the nose smells odors, and so forth. They all appear to be what? They all appear to be inherently existing, right? The inherent existence of things, which is perceived by the cognitions of any of the 5 unimpaired senses, is analogous to phenomena such as the face's reflection, or a double moon, or falling hairs, floaters, and so on, which appear to distorted sensory perceptions. Okay, we talk about 2 kinds of sensory perceptions, those that are correct and those that are distorted. So unimpaired senses means that there's no impairment to your eyes or ears or so forth. But when you see floaters or you see a double moon, what else here? When you see reflection and so on, they appear to distort sensory perception. How about the reflection of a face? Why does that appear to a distorted sensory perception? Is that sensory perception? When Paul sees his face when he's shaving, do you shave, Paul?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I just think you're so young. I wasn't sure you.
Yes, thank you, Venerable.
So when you look at your face in the mirror and you see that face in the mirror, that's considered a impaired perception? That's considered to be a distorted sensory perception?
I believe so. Right, because the object does not exist in the manner in which it appears.
Okay, there's two ways that it's appearing. One, it's appearing to be inherently existent, but one, it's appearing, the gross sense is appearing to be a face, an actual face, your actual face.
Right.
Right? So we're talking about, the second sense that it doesn't exist as an actual face. So therefore it is a distorted sensory perception. Okay. That existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristic is perceived despite being impossible. All right, I put the emphasis in the wrong words in. That existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristic is perceived we perceive phenomena existing as though they're inherently existent, despite being impossible. That is, despite the fact that phenomena cannot be inherently existent, is analogous to the existence of the reflection as a face and so on, as being impossible. So your reflection of your face in the mirror is not possible. It's just not a face, and yet still being perceived as such. So this is the analogy that Chandrakirti was using here to explain how these things can still function and so forth. Form and so on are analogous to phenomena like mirror images, echoes, and the like. Just as we would not take the intrinsic existence, the inherent existence of the five sensory objects, such as form, to be external realities, we would not take the intrinsic existence of the five sensory objects. So there's the inherent existence of forms is not an external object, because it doesn't exist at all, right? There's no inherently existent visual forms and so forth. Yet we would posit the form and so forth that are perceived as such to be external realities. Likewise, although one would not regard the reflection of a face to be an externally real face, one would not regard the reflection of a face to be an externally real face, right? One can still characterize phenomena themselves, mere images and so on, as external realities. So when it comes to characterizing what is and what is not an external reality, the situation is equal for both. So he has in brackets then form and so on the one hand, and mirror images and so on the other. So what are we talking about? So when it comes to characterizing what is and what is not an external reality. So what is not an external reality? Give example, Stephen?
Seeing the reflection of a face in a mirror as an actual face that you could feed or you could shave.
You could feed the face. Yeah, I'm thinking like an inherently existent form is not an external reality, right? So what is an external reality? Wouldn't the reflection of the face be an external reality? I thought you were saying
yes.
Oh, it
yes,
was.
it could be, but if you thought it, I mean, the reflection is there. It exists externally. But if you thought it was an actual face, it could not be.
Right. Okay. So let's continue. The false nature of a reflection, in the sense of it lacking the reality of a face, in the sense of it being an actual face. So it is false nature in that sense. It's also false in the sense of being inherently existent the way that it appears. Okay, but we're just talking. There are these two falsities involved there. So we're just talking about the gross one. The false nature of reflection in the sense of it lacking the reality of being a face is something that can be established by all reasonable, literate people of the world whose minds are not informed by scripture or reasoning presenting emptiness. You can understand that falsity without having any idea about emptiness, right? A parakeet might still consider its reflection as another parakeet and be nuzzling its beak upon it and so forth and so on. But reasonable, literate people of the world whose minds are not informed by scripture or reasoning presenting emptiness, they can still understand. Ordinary people, your dishwasher repairman or your mother-in-law or anyone who's literate and reasonable, they know that reflections of a face in a mirror are not the actual faces, even though they don't know anything about the second part of that falsity, right? So it is entirely wrong to say that the realization of this level of falsehood represents some kind of coarse, rational cognition of emptiness. That's a very important point. So to realize that the mirror image is, quote, empty, unquote, of being a face is not any kind of coarse reasoning or rational cognition of emptiness. What does he mean by rational here? What's he translating? Detar tokpa de rikshe rakpa chiktu topa ni me rikpa konao. I'm not sure what he's talking about. False or some kind of course, rational cognition. Rational cognition. What is that? Paul or John, do you see? What is he thinking rational? Oh, rikshe. I say, detar tokpa de rikshe rakpa. So rikshe means reasoning consciousness or analyzing consciousness. Okay, so he's causing rational consciousness, right? Rational cognition. Sean, your hand must be getting tired, so I'm going to call on you.
Well, I'm still trying to get this separation correct. So are you saying that any sense perception requires an external object for that sense consciousness to arise?
Yes, because there have to be those three conditions, right?
But once it has arisen, that appearance that has arisen in consciousness, so the external object is a different nature from cognition, but that appearance is not. Is that correct? Like once it appears to consciousness, then
You're talking about eye consciousness or mental consciousness? We're talking about eye consciousness. Right? Let's just talk about eye consciousness. So eye consciousness needs an external object. Then?
So I guess once you have a sense consciousness, everything after that is a mental consciousness, correct?
No, you can continue to have eye consciousness, right? When you look at you're having a conversation with someone, unless you turn your face away from them, you're still seeing their face, right?
But that appearance, like it feels like the appearance that's generated by sense consciousness is not the object itself. It's part of mind at that point, is it not?
So an eye consciousness can be, if it's unimpaired eye consciousness, it can have a valid perception of an object. So that external object is actually perceived by the eye consciousness. Then what?
So that direct perception is different than a appearance in mind?
Oh, of course, yeah. So as soon as you see something, the very next instant, there will be a mental image of what you're seeing. There will be the very first instant, there is said to be one instant of mental direct perception of that object, as though the mind was just up there with the eye, you know. But after that, the mental consciousness is dealing with what you're seeing by means of a mental image. Your eyes are still seeing the actual object, but your mental consciousness is thinking about it by means of a mental image of that. And that thinking can be very disastrous if you're thinking, oh man, that's so beautiful. I want to get that for my living room, you know, or that fellow is so handsome. I'm going to go over and have a cup of tea with him or something like that. That all of that's done by your mental consciousness, right? On the basis of the eye consciousness doesn't engage in any of that. It's just seeing the actual object out there. Okay, let me continue a little bit further, and we'll end up. So then, in the Tibetan text, it says gelte. So that means if someone were to say the following. So Tibetan Jinpa phrases it this way. In that case, one might ask, the Tibetan just says gelte. If someone says, when one comes to establish the false nature of a reflection along the lines familiar to the world, so when one comes to establish the false nature of a reflection in the worldly sense of it not being an actual face, right? That's what it means, along the lines familiar to the world. The doubt might rise, doesn't this establish falsehood as defined by Majjhimaka? If not, how does the former, a mirror image, serve as an analogy for the latter, Majjhimika, emptiness? So this again gets into a very important point. Say, for instance, in order to realize emptiness, according to logic, you have to have, what are the elements that are necessary? I guess John has disappeared out of frustration. The Wi-Fi at, where is he, Paul? At Tibet House or at Robert Tillman's?
I believe he was at Tibet House. Yeah.
But the Wi-Fi sucks at Tibet House. Let's see, Rachel, when you have a logical proposition, what are the elements that are necessary?
So you have the subject or topic,
right?
Then you have the predicate and the reason.
Right. Those three are the general three. And then what else do you need for it to be a perfect reason, perfect reasoning? You need one more element.
An example or illustration?
An example or illustration. And what's the quality of that example or illustration? What does it have to be?
It has to be unique, and it has to match the definition. But I'm not sure if I got it.
You're not getting what I'm saying. So generally, the first two elements, the subject and the predicate, are called what? The thesis, right?
Mm.
So you have to be able to prove the thesis on the example before you realize it on the, let's say sound is impermanent because it's a product like a gong in the gompa or something like that. Did I phrase that right, Paul? What is the quality of the example that has to be present? You have to be able to realize what?
You have to realize the what the forward and backward pervasion with regard. No, no. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting.
Yeah. So when you have a logical reason that's going to, let's say, establish emptiness, you might say the reflection, let's say the form that you're seeing is empty of inherent existence, like a reflection. So that means you have to have realized that a reflection is empty of inherent existence before you realize the form that you're talking about, the visual form you're talking about, is empty of inherent existence. It has to be simpler to understand. Whereas to understand a reflection is empty of inherent existence should be just as difficult to understand as the fact that an external form is empty of inherent existence. So why is it used? Because there's some kind of similarity, because there's two levels of subtlety of falsity, two levels of falsity, let's say, of a reflection. One, the worldly level, the gross level, that it's empty of being the actual object that you think it is. You know, so if you see the reflection of a face or the reflection of something else in a mirror, or like, say, the deer that sees the reflection of the moon in a pond, right? There's two levels of falsity there. It's false in not being an actual moon in the water, and it's false as not being inherently existent the way that it appears. So there's two kinds of appearances. It appears to be an actual moon. It appears to be inherently existing in a reflection, right? So that is one of the reasons that a reflection is sometimes used, often used, when you talk about visual perception, when you're trying to establish the non-inherent existence. We'll go over this again, don't worry. But I think that's what's being talked about here. It says, if not, how does the former, a mirror image, serve as an analogy for the latter, the Majjhimaka emptiness? So then let's see, let's just read a little bit further. Here, the use of phenomena such as a mirror image as an analogy involves citing a level of falsehood already established by the world from everyday experience. It is not the sense of falsehood as defined by the Majjhimaka, that the person has already established that is being cited as an analogy. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. We're going to have a 2-week break, or you can say a week break. So rather than next Saturday, we'll start the Saturday after that. And I would ask if you could sort of prepare by reading the rest of this little section, and we will go over it in more detail then. And again, as this is the last of a 8-class sequence, we won't have a discussion group on Monday, but I will have a office hour, which Nadine has booked both half hours this time. So before we finish, how are we doing? Are your heads like the emoji, the exploding head emoji, or Venerable Lobsang Punsok says thumbs up, no problem. Rachel, what are you thinking?
Venerable George, I just, since we went through it this time about how the object becomes the cause and therefore is a prior condition to the consciousness. I have this memory that recently we were talking about how they arise simultaneously.
Okay, so what were we, I was hoping that Stephen would ask that question.
I thought that's what you were referring to, but
So what's the difference?
I couldn't find, I'm so sorry, I couldn't find while I'm trying to listen, I couldn't find the reference in my mind about when it was saying, we were being told that this was simultaneous. So I don't have a very clear
Okay.
question.
So that was talking about the process of imputing an object. So when you impute the existence of an object, say the first time you're giving a name to something, someone explains to you, oh, that's that's a rose. Well, not a good example. Most people know what a rose is. What would you say is something that not everyone would know? You see something and say, what is that? And so you see some form out there, let's say a plant or something like that, but you don't know its name. It's not something that you remember seeing before. So at that point, on the basis of designation, the basis of imputation of the name that you give, and the consciousness that gives that name, all those three are simultaneous. That's the process of imputation. That's not talking about the visual perception of the rose. The visual perception of the rose is that the physical rose is out there, and that's the object condition for the eye consciousness. And you have to have a previous moment of consciousness, not the consciousness of a rose, just a previous moment of any consciousness that acts as the continuity to give rise to that next moment of consciousness. And you have to have the interface between the object and the consciousness, which is the faculty. Those are that there is a causal relationship in the arisal of that consciousness. So the Mikyan has to exist before the eye consciousness. But the process of imputation, we're talking about something else. This is in the domain of the mental consciousness. The eyes don't impute, right? Rachel? The eye consciousness doesn't impute. This is a rose, or this is a boy, or this is a car, or anything. That's done by the mental consciousness. So when you designate or impute something, that process is like the three legs of a I need to get some fingers together. Three legs of a tripod that depend upon one another. One of them doesn't exist before the other. The moment that you give the name, at that moment you are what do you say? The basis of designation is coming into existence for you at that moment. And the mind that is imputing it comes into existence at that moment. So there's a lot of subtlety there going on. Making sense? What do you think, Louise? Making sense?
Yeah, subtle, different.
Okay, yeah, those are different, but there's something. So you can also talk about the subsequent moment. Once you've imputed the object, let's say you've imputed that that's a rose, so that the mind that gives the imputation, the name rose, say that which is the imputation itself, and the basis of designation or the basis of imputation, all three of them are simultaneous. Subsequently, you can have a mental consciousness of that rose, right? What kind of consciousness would that be? Would that be a direct perception? No, it would be a conceptual consciousness, right? All consciousness is either conceptual or perceptual. So you would have a conceptual understanding of that rose subsequent to giving the name. And that has to have the causal relationship when you have the perception of the rose rather than just imputing it. So something to think about. Sean, you have another question.
So is the cognition of, say, a I consciousness,
Yeah.
Is that not an image itself?
Is that not an image?
Like it feels like the cognition that's seeing an object is making an image of that object. Is
Well,
it not?
when we talk about just ordinary perception, we talk about the appearing object, right? And for a perception, ordinary good perception, the appearing object and the object perceived are the same. Whereas for a conception, the appearing object is the mental image. Get that out of the way. The mental image is the appearing object, but the object perceived is, out there. You have a mental image of your mother's face, but you're actually perceiving your mother's face. So they are different for a conception, but for conceptual consciousness. For perception, the appearing object and the object that you grasp, that you perceive, they are the same. So there is, you can talk about an appearing object, but that is the object itself for perception.
Right, that's why I'm trying to separate it out from the object of, like, it feels like the consciousness part is an image itself.
Consciousness is not an image. So it depends on what you mean by, so something for you to think about. There's a lot to go through here. That's why in general, to be able to study these kinds of texts, you need to have had some kind of preparation in Lorig and Dura and Drupta and these various subjects to be familiar with the terminology. Like, say, for instance, the very first course they study at the monastery is called Collected Topics, Dura. And that and the full title is the Collected Topics of the Pramana literature. So it's collected topics mainly from the Pramana Vartika and Pramana Samuchaya and those kinds of things, the kinds of terms that you will come up with. And then you go on to studying other subjects so that you're already familiar with these things beforehand. So, but the question you're asking is a good question. What is, is there an image when we talk about image, one way we talk about mental image. That means within the mental consciousness, like the little celluloid positive thing in the old-fashioned thing, you look at the Eiffel Tower, that was an interface between you and your perception, what you thought was the perception of the Eiffel Tower. In a sense, you were seeing the Eiffel Tower by means of that mental image. That was an image. That was the appearing object. Whereas in visual perception, you see the object directly. We call it direct perception. And what appears to your consciousness is what you actually perceive. They are the same. Whereas for a conceptual consciousness, they're different. So that's something to see if you can integrate that into your thinking. That might clarify it a little bit. So before we finish, I just remind you, there's no class next week. We'll start the week after that. I'm encouraging you to read this section again and finish this section. And yeah, this is a very important section. Yeah. So any other questions before we end? Paul, do you have anything you wanted to add? John has disappeared. Jeremy, how are you doing?
Very great. Thanks, Venerable George. Very happy.
Okay, no questions. Stephen,
Thank you.
Anna? No? You have something?
Thank you, Venerable George. I just really appreciate how you explained everything.
Okay. Okay. I was just wondering if you had a question. Ron, any question? No? Louise? Everyone's good? I'm not going to ask Sean again because he always has good questions. Karen? Or David? No? Rachel? Okay, so still complicated. Don?
No, it's been a good day, George. Thank you.
Okay, okay. I won't ask Shanka or Sean, Venerable Losang Punsok or Sean, because they always have questions. Nadine, maybe you have the last chance to ask a question before we end.
I'm so lucky because I can ask you in the Dharma office hour.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're good. So what time is that? 5 o'clock? Okay, so that'll be 5 o'clock my time. Okay, thank you very much. Let's dedicate the virtues that we created by this torturous twisting of our minds. Yewa di nirdudag, lama sange drubyurne, droa chikyang malupa, de sala kopa shok. Due to these virtues, yewa di, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that same state. So here it says Dei Sala, Dei, that state meaning the state of a Guru Buddha. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not yet arisen in my mind and the minds of others arise and grow due to these virtues. And may that which has arisen, that little seed of bodhicitta that has arisen in my mind and the minds of others, not diminish, but increase more and more. And still waiting for although we've mentioned before, we've received word from His Holiness that Lama Zopa's Rinpoche's reincarnation has taken birth in Nepal, but we still don't know where he is or she is. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, that means bodhisattvas, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, those are the main ways that we can spread the teachings. We explain them and then we put them into practice. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, and the great waves of the mind generation, bodhicitta, of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then for all of our gurus, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, through which I can see them, I can understand them, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by love and mercy. When I say by love and compassion, say mercy means love and compassion. Illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please don't depart but live long and stable lives. Thank you. Keep your minds happy. I'll see you in 2 weeks. This time is very trying, not only because of the, the violence by human beings, but by the disturbance of the elements, storms and earthquakes and heat waves and cold waves and everything, but also especially dealing with the political nature of the United States right now. This is the prime time to be able to practice the the training of the mind. So try to keep that in mind, try to apply it all the time during these coming weeks. And I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Venerable
you.
George.
Thank you.
Thank you.